I walked in on my brother proposing to my ex-fiancée, using the ring I helped him buy. Before I start, ensure to subscribe, like, and drop a comment too. I have replayed that night in my head so many times that sometimes I feel like I can almost see it from above, as if I've detached from my own body and become just another witness to the moment everything I thought I knew about loyalty, family, and love was incinerated in the span of a single heartbeat. The memory doesn't come to me in order. It flickers in fragments, little scenes that don't always fit together but are burned into me all the same. The glow of the fairy lights strung over the patio, the way my brother's hand trembled as he held out the ring box, the sharp, startled intake of breath from her lips when he dropped to one knee, and the bright, metallic taste of bile rising in the back of my throat when I realized exactly what was happening. It still sounds like a bad dream when I try to explain it out loud, like something out of a trashy melodrama you'd watch late at night and roll your eyes at because no one in real life would ever be that cruel. But that's the thing about betrayal. It never feels real until it happens to you. Until you're standing there in the dark, clutching a bottle of Pinot Grigio you thought you were bringing over to celebrate your brother's new job, only to discover that the job was a lie, the invitation was a setup, and the woman you had once imagined building a life with was standing there, her face pale with a cocktail of guilt and excitement, as she prepared to say yes to the person who shared your blood. I had always been close to my brother, or at least I thought I was. We were only a year apart, and when we were kids, people sometimes mistook us for twins because we had the same dark hair and the same crooked grin we inherited from our father. Growing up, it felt like we were a team. Us against the world, two scrawny boys who learned to look out for each other when our parents' marriage finally imploded under the weight of all the secrets and petty resentments they'd been dragging behind them like anchors. Even as adults, when we moved into different apartments and started building our separate lives, we still stayed close. We met for beers at least twice a month. We watched football on the weekends. He was the first person I called when I got promoted, the first person I hugged when I bought my first house, the first person I introduced to her when I thought I'd finally found the woman who was going to be my forever. Her name was Elise. I used to love the way that name felt in my mouth. Soft and elegant, like something too delicate to be sullied by the messiness of real life. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, the kind of event where everyone stands around awkwardly holding plastic cups and making small talk about the weather. But when she smiled at me from across the kitchen, her hair tucked behind one ear, her eyes bright in a way I still dream about, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Like the ground had shifted just enough to make room for her. For a while it was perfect. Or maybe I just wanted it to be perfect so badly that I ignored every little warning that it wasn't. My brother liked her immediately, or so he said. He was always a little too attentive when she was around, always volunteering to help her with errands or asking her about her day in that earnest, almost boyish way that used to make people love him. I didn't think much of it then. I just thought he was being supportive, that he was happy I was happy. When I decided I was going to propose, he was the first person I told. I remember sitting across from him at that same old dive bar, my hands shaking around my glass as I confessed that I'd been saving up for a ring and that I thought it was finally time. He clapped me on the shoulder and told me he was proud of me. He said she was special and that I deserved that kind of love. And when I pulled out the small, glossy brochure from the jeweler, the one I'd been carrying around for weeks, he leaned over the table to look, his eyes thoughtful, and offered to chip in if I needed help covering the last few $100s. I never needed the money, but the offer touched me in a way I can't explain. Felt like an endorsement, like a blessing, like no matter what happened, he was in my corner. But that proposal never happened. A week before I planned to take her out to the little coastal inn where we'd had our first weekend away, Elise came to my apartment looking tired, her face pinched in a way I'd never seen before. She didn't sit down. She didn't take off her coat. She just stood there, twisting her keys in her hands, and told me she wasn't ready, that she loved me but not in the way I deserved, that she needed time to figure out who she was without me. I remember nodding and telling her I understood because I thought that was the noble thing to do, but inside, it felt like someone had driven a spike through my chest. For weeks after she left, I tried to tell myself that it was temporary, that she'd come back once she realized what we had together was real. My brother was there for all of it. He listened to my late-night rants, helped me box up the things she left behind, told me I'd be okay even when I didn't believe it. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that he had already started something with her behind my back. That while I was lying awake in the dark, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, they were texting, meeting for coffee, slowly crossing the line that separated friendship from something else. The night of the proposal, I was supposed to be working late. That's what he told me when he called to ask if I could stop by afterward to toast some good news. He didn't say what the news was, But I was so relieved to have a distraction that I didn't question it. I remember the exact moment I stepped through the gate and saw them. The fairy lights strung overhead, the little bistro table set with champagne and candles, the two of them standing so close together that there was no doubt in my mind what was about to happen. He held out the ring box. My ring box, the same one I'd shown him all those months ago, and when he dropped to one knee, I felt everything inside me go horribly, blindingly still. She must have seen me first. Her eyes widened, her lips parted in this silent, stricken gasp, but she didn't say my name. She didn't move to stop him. She just stood there, frozen in her betrayal. And he, my brother, didn't even look up. I don't remember setting the wine bottle down. I don't remember walking backward through the gate. I don't remember getting in my car. What I do remember is the drive home, the way the streetlights blurred through my tears, the way my hands shook so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. I remember pulling into my driveway and sitting there for hours, replaying every moment I'd trusted them both, every confession, every quiet evening I thought was building toward a future I could count on. I wish I could say that was the last time I saw them, that I had the strength to cut them out of my life cleanly, but nothing about betrayal is ever clean. There were phone calls, hers mostly, begging me to understand, telling me she hadn't meant for it to happen, that she never planned to fall in love with him. There were messages from him, alternating between apologies and defensive justifications, like he couldn't decide whether he was sorry or whether he thought I deserved it somehow. I didn't answer any of them. Couldn't. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw him kneeling there with my ring, and I knew there was no apology in the world big enough to cover that particular kind of treachery. Months have passed, and people keep telling me that time will dull the edges of what happened. Maybe they're right. Maybe someday I'll be able to think about that night without feeling like my insides have been torn open all over again. But right now it still feels raw, like an open wound I don't know how to stitch closed. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them. I don't even know if I should. All I know is that I'm not the same person I was before I walked through that gate, and I don't think I ever will be again. The strangest thing about betrayal is how it doesn't just live in your memories. It seeps into everything, staining the ordinary moments you used to take for granted until even the simplest parts of your day feel poisoned by what you now know. That first week after I saw them together, I didn't leave the house except to go to work, where I buried myself in projects with a desperation that probably looked admirable to the people around me but felt, inside, like the frantic flailing of a drowning man. Every evening, I'd come home to a silent living room, turn on the television just for the noise, and sit there on the edge of the couch, staring at the glow of the screen without absorbing a single word. It wasn't even loneliness that weighed on me in those hours. It was more like a dull, stunned disbelief that this was my life now. That my brother, the person I trusted more than almost anyone, had made a choice so selfish and final that nothing could ever undo it. Some nights I would replay the moment when I first realized what was happening, the way the patio looked under the fairy lights, the hush of the evening broken only by the tiny pop of the champagne cork I never stayed long enough to hear. I would remember the expression on Elisa's face. Not quite regret, not quite joy, something fragile and unformed, and I would find myself wanting to scream, to throw something, to punch a hole in the wall just so the pain in my chest could be replaced by something simpler, something physical I could point to as proof of what they'd done to me. But I never did. Because that was another thing about this particular betrayal. It stole not only my trust but my ability to act. It was as if my entire body had been put in a cast, immobilized by the shock. My phone filled up with messages I didn't read. Some from friends who had heard whispers about what happened and didn't know whether to take sides. Some from my mother, who was devastated in the polite, helpless way she always was whenever conflict erupted between us. Some from my brother, each one more unsteady than the last, until the words blurred together in a kind of pleading desperation I almost pitied. Almost. I think that was what surprised me most. Not how much I still hurt, but how completely the love I used to feel for them both had calcified into something brittle and sharp. I knew it wasn't healthy to hold on to that anger, but every time I thought about letting it go, forgiving them, starting over, I felt like I was being asked to pretend that none of it mattered. That the choices they made hadn't detonated everything I'd spent years building. About a week after it happened, my mother called and left me a voicemail, her voice trembling. She said she'd spoken to my brother, that he was worried about me, that he knew he'd made a terrible mistake, but still hoped I'd be able to talk to him someday. I didn't call her back. I didn't want to hear her try to smooth it over, to talk about forgiveness and second chances when she hadn't been the one blindsided. I knew her well enough to guess what she was thinking. That family was family, that time would heal us, that one day I'd look back and see this as just another difficult chapter. But standing there in my kitchen, listening to her voice echo off the tile, all I could think was that some betrayals don't belong in the same category as ordinary mistakes. A betrayal like that wasn't an accident. It was a decision. 100 little decisions, really. Each one a tiny step away from decency, from loyalty, from the respect you owe the people who love you. And I wasn't ready to pretend it was something else. Took nearly 3 weeks for my brother to show up in person. It was late on a Thursday night, and I'd just come home from the office, tired in the way only grief can make you tired. Like every cell in your body has been scraped hollow. I didn't even hear him walk up the front steps. The first sign he was there was the knock on the door, a hesitant, uneven rhythm that made my skin prickle with a dread I hadn't felt since the night I watched him kneel in front of Elise. I thought about not answering. I thought about waiting him out, pretending I wasn't home. But something in me, pride maybe, or some final flicker of the closeness we used to share, forced me to my feet. When I opened the door, he looked terrible. His hair was unwashed, his jaw dark with a few days of stubble. His eyes rimmed with the kind of red that comes from too many nights lying awake, trying to justify the unjustifiable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, the cold air rushing between us like an accusation. "Can I come in?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse. I wanted to say no. I wanted to slam the door in his face, to protect what little dignity I still had left. But in the end I stepped aside because some part of me, some weak, exhausted part, needed to hear him say it out loud. He stood in the living room, turning his keys over and over in his hands, staring at the floor like a child caught stealing. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I don't even know where to start." Waited. I didn't tell him it was okay because it wasn't. I didn't tell him I understood because I didn't. "It just happened," he went on, each word sounding more desperate than the last. "After she left you, she called me. She was a mess. I tried to help her. God, I swear I tried. But we were both lonely, and it got complicated, and..." He broke off, his voice catching. "I never meant for it to be this way," he said. "But I love her." There it was. The one sentence that stripped away any illusion that this had been some accidental lapse of judgment, that he could ever take it back. "You love her," I repeated slowly, like I needed to taste the words to believe them. He nodded. "And you used the ring I bought for her." His shoulders slumped. "I didn't. I didn't have time to get another one. She said she didn't care, that she didn't need anything fancy." I felt something inside me recoil, a bone-deep disgust that he could stand there and recite that detail like it mattered. Like the problem was the ring, and not everything that came before it. For a long moment I couldn't speak. My chest felt too tight. My throat felt raw. I wanted to throw him out, to tell him he'd lost the right to call himself my brother. But then, inexplicably, I found myself laughing, a sharp, humorless sound that startled even me. He looked at me, bewildered. "Do you hear yourself?" I said finally, my voice shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, and for the first time, I saw something in his expression that looked like real shame. "I'm sorry," he said again, so quietly it barely reached me. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't erase the months of lying. Sorry didn't undo the moment I walked into that backyard and saw my entire future being handed to someone else. Sorry didn't change the fact that every memory I had of our childhood, every holiday and inside joke and promise, was now tainted by the knowledge that he was capable of this. "Get out," I whispered, my hands curling into fists at my sides. He didn't argue. He turned and walked to the door, and when it closed behind him, the silence felt different, emptier somehow. Like something essential had been cut away. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there, breathing hard, staring at the spot where he'd stood, feeling the hollow space where our bond used to be. In the weeks that followed, I learned just how quickly people pick sides, even when they swear they don't want to. My mother tried to stay neutral, but her voice always tightened when I refused to return his calls. My father, who hadn't been part of much in our lives since the divorce, sent me a stiff, awkward email telling me that family was forever, like he thought a platitude could erase the betrayal. But the truth was, nothing anyone said made a difference. The wound was too deep. I wish I could say there was some moment of clarity, some graceful acceptance that came over me as time passed. But the reality was messy. Healing didn't happen in a straight line. Some mornings I woke up feeling almost okay, only to be knocked flat by the sight of an old photo or the echo of a memory I hadn't realized was still alive in me. If there was any comfort, it was in the small acts of survival. The friends who showed up with takeout and cheap beer, who didn't ask questions they knew I couldn't answer. The long walks I took at night, just to remind myself that I was still here, that no matter how thoroughly they'd broken my heart, I hadn't disappeared. And slowly, very slowly, I started to believe that maybe I would be okay again. Not the same, but okay. Because if betrayal teaches you anything, it's that love is not always enough to keep people good, and that sometimes the only thing you can do is keep going anyway.